Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Agentforce NOW codeLive. I am your host, Charles Watkins, lead developer advocate here at Salesforce, and we have an exciting show for you today. So, we are going to be talking about Lightning type overrides in Agentforce service agents. We're going to be talking about how you can now use your Lightning components to inject structured forms and rich UIs right in your agent conversations. Now, as always, I want to remind you that codeLive is a live show, which means in addition to your comments, I would love for you all to send your questions as you have them throughout the presentation and the coding session. I am going to be checking the chat very proactively and trying to get to as many questions as possible. But before we hop on into it, let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to see where everyone is joining this session from. And I see we got some folks joining from Toronto. We have Sally. Good to see you, Sally. We have Edson joining from Mexico. We have folks joining from Brazil and India, people from all around the world. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. So I'm going to pull up my screen here, and we're going to get to learning about today's subject. All right. So before I get into coding, let's just level set and talk a little bit about Lightning type overrides. Now, if you've been following Agentforce, especially Agentforce service agents, you know that this is a highly requested feature. And the reason is because it allows you to bring rich UI inputs and outputs to your agent conversations, allowing branding opportunities, and so much more. So let's talk a little bit about the default agent experience without Lightning type overrides. So the default experience is really conversational UI, right? So imagine this. Imagine you have a service agent, you've deployed it, and it's out there and it's helping people make reservations or bookings or schedule appointments. This is kind of what it might look like. Your agent, someone asks, can I make a booking? Then the agent's going to ask the date, the time, how many people, special request. And if it doesn't have the context of the person's name, their email address, or their phone number, it'll ask that too. And at minimum, that means that any given agent conversation, just to do one simple thing, takes 4 questions, 4 round trips, maybe more. And this is a really error-prone process. People can mistype their names, they can mistype their email addresses. And in addition to that, if it's a more complex process that involves multiple names, there can be some ambiguity. Even with dates, for example, there can be ambiguity, right? So like if I say, what date would you like? And a user types 2/11/2026, is that February 11th or is it November 2nd? Your conversational UI is making some assumptions. And beyond that, it's just very generic, right? Every single conversational UI experience is kind of the same. And that's where Lightning type overrides come in. So with Lightning type overrides, you can essentially hook into an agent conversation right when the agent's about to do something. So like book a reservation or kick off an onboarding flow or anything, and say to the agent, instead of rendering just some text that you generated, instead, I want you to render a custom Lightning web component that I have made specifically for this action. And it allows you to do primarily 2 things. The first thing it allows you to do is to override inputs, that back and forth where you're just asking for information, with a form, a rich form that you can brand and you can customize to your heart's content. The second thing it allows you to do is to render outputs. So if you want to render a custom confirmation component like the one we see here, you can do that. And it can be a branded rich experience. And the benefit of this really is that you get a consistent and predictable experience for your end customers that also allows your agents to perform a lot better because they don't need to do as many round trips. There's not as much ambiguity. And so what this really does is combines the predictability of regular old standard graphical user interfaces with the intelligence and flexibility of AI agents. And so you get the best of both worlds. So here's how it works at a high level. So a user makes a request to your agent. They say, I want to book a reservation. The AI agent infers intent, looks for what actions it has. So maybe it has a booking reservation action. And right at that step, the editor override from your Lightning type override will just drop in the editor component right inside the conversation to collect the necessary information. Now, once that information is collected, it's sent to the agent action. And the action can be a flow, an auto launch flow. It could be an invocable Apex method or an OR enabled Apex method or a REST method. And it's going to execute whichever automation that happens to be. And it'll then render the override. It'll render the component that you want. Now, you don't have to have both. You can have one or the other. If it makes sense to have an editor, but not a renderer, you can just go with the editor. If it makes sense to just have a renderer, you can just go with the renderer. But it allows you to replace, Q&A with UI. So it's very, very powerful. So for today's codeLive, we're going to do a deep dive on configuring an editor and a renderer using Lightning type overrides. Now, this entire thing requires a decent amount of setup. You need an invocable method. You need an agent action that you want to override. You need an active agent. You need an enhanced chat v1 deployment. And we're going to be doing a upgrade too. And then you also need components for your renderer override that you want to show in your agent conversations and your editor override that you want to show in your conversation. So to save time, and because we only have an hour, I've already done that work ahead of time. And at the end of the show, I'll share some resources where you can see where you can learn how to do these things, because we covered all of these concepts in prior codeLives and videos. For today's plan, we are just going to migrate from Enhanced Chat v1 to Enhanced Chat v2. And that's important because custom Lightning type overrides are only supported in Enhanced Chat v2. And just in case you don't know this, Enhanced Chat v1 was formerly known as messaging for in-app and web. So it's not like a completely new thing. It has a different name. Enhanced Chat v2 is a new thing. It is a meaningful upgrade to Enhanced Chat v2 with a variety of capabilities in addition to custom Lightning type overrides. But we'll talk about that in another codeLive or another video. The second thing we're going to do is we are going to configure a Lightning type renderer and editor override. At least a renderer override, but we're going to shoot for both. Okay. Now, I'm going to take a quick look at the chat to see if we have any questions. All right, we got a good question here. What are the limitations? This one comes from Sally. What are the limitations of Lightning web components we must follow to be used in Lightning types? So the most important, we're going to cover this, but generally, Lightning type overrides are very similar to Lightning web components. They are Lightning web components. The most important things to follow are some changes you need to make in the metadata and some considerations you need to make when you're building the component, as well as some considerations around if you're using Apex methods inside that custom Lightning web component, you need to make sure that it's able to execute in whatever context you're working on. But we'll cover it when we get coding. So let me go ahead here. And we are going to get started. All right, so let's take a look at the agent that we're going to be working on. And this is a very minimal agent, okay? We're going to keep it simple. So here I am in setup, And I have a variety of different agents. I have a service agent, and this is the one we're going to be working on. This is the Pronto service agent. Now, if I hop into the agent builder, and you'll notice that I'm currently in the legacy Agentforce builder. That is because at the time of this live stream, custom lightning type overrides don't quite work with agents built with agent script. They will in the future, they don't right now. So that's another thing to know. Now, this particular agent has two different topics. We're going to be working on reservation management. That's going to be our use case. And what this agent is able to do is book reservations. So let's take a look at that. So I'm just going to say I want to make a reservation, and let's make this a little bit bigger. It's easier to see. I think this is pretty easy to see. It might be a little too big. All right, so same thing we expected, right? So here it's front loading all of the details that we need. So, you know, I can put in my phone number, tomorrow, the date, the time, let's say 6, and I want to book for the table, right? And as we can see here in a planner, it looked to see, it identified the topic, reservation management. It sees that it has one action to book a reservation. It considered that. And then it took the information that we had and passed it into our input. And so this is fine, right? Like not too much back and forth, but we can do better. If this were an onboarding flow, this would be quite painful. Okay, so let's say that we want to override this experience of having just questions in text that we could easily mistype or make mistakes because there's no way to really confirm after you hit enter with a rich text input, and that we want to do the same with our outputs. Now, what we're going to do to start is just focus on the inputs, and we'll go pretty slow so that we can get the concepts. And then once we're done, we'll hop on over to the output. The first thing you'll need to do when you want to set up a lightning type override is to hop into your action that you want to override, okay? And you need 3 pieces of information. The first is what is being called. So here we're calling an Apex class called book reservation action that has an invocable method. Okay, so that's our action. That's going to be useful for when we want to hop into our code. And the second thing that we want to take a look at are the data types and renderers for our input and our output. So this is the thing that you can hook into and replace. So our goal today is going to be to replace this data type, which is defined inside of Apex. This is just an Apex class, right? We're gonna switch to this data type and this input renderer with a custom lightning type override. And so when we're done, we're going to have a value here that tells Salesforce whenever this action is invoked, don't send some text, grab a specific Lightning Web component that will put in all the information you need for this data type. Similarly, we're going to do the same thing for the output. We're going to have a custom Lightning type that tells Salesforce, don't output just text from the agent, output the data from this data type in a specific Lightning Web component and render that instead. And so you're just replacing conversational UI with structured UI from custom Lightning Web components. So we're going to stop there for now. I'm going to take a look at some questions here. Okay, so let's see here. We have a lot of questions. I see one. Enhanced chat v2 plus internal. Here's a really good one here from Garrett. Enhanced chat v2 plus internal agents can use this currently. That is correct. You can use you can use internal employee agents with Lightning type overrides. And within the internal context, it's not quite enhanced chat. Enhanced chat is mostly a customer facing thing, a customer facing channels. But it's a really good question. Can you use Lightning type overrides with employee agents? You can. You absolutely can. You've been able to do that actually for a while. The big ship here is that you can use Lightning type overrides with enhanced chat for service agents. Okay. So we know what we want to override. Okay. The next thing we're going to need to do is to configure our Lightning Web Component so that it can actually target a Lightning type override. And you'll see why. There's kind of a circular thing going on here where they both kind of link to each other. So for that, we're going to hop into some code. So here we have our project. And what we're going to do is we are going to make some updates. But before we make some updates, I'm just going to show you what we have here. We have some Apex classes here. This is book reservation action. This is just our Apex class that we want to create Lightning type overrides for. And as you can see, it has an input and an output, right? Now, when you're building an override, what you need to do is create a Lightning Web Component that is able to either accept an output's data, or set the inputs for a form, right? So when someone books a reservation, we are going to send a request. And in that request, if we take a look at the Apex code, we can see what information our Lightning Web Component will need to set. So we'll need a reservation date, start time, resource name, email, phone number, and ideally a party size, but I forgot to implement that, I think. Okay, so we'll want all of this information in our form, right? Now we've already created our form, so we have a Lightning Web Component that can handle all of this data. And similarly, for our outputs, let's take a look at our outputs. It's just a DTO. We will want to render a Lightning Web Component that accepts a confirmation code, reservation data, start time, resource name, email, phone, and status. It's important to keep in mind when you're building your Lightning type override, you're really just trying to create a UI for these outputs and inputs. Okay. So those are our Apex classes. Here in our Lightning Web Component folder, we have two components here, one for our input and one for our output. For our input, we have our reservation view, and this is just a Lightning Web Component. Go back here. This is just a Lightning Web Component here that takes in, let's see here, takes in all of the same information that you saw before: a reservation date, a start time, resource name, email, phone number, and just renders a form essentially. And if we want to see this, we can use the new Lightning preview. Let's see here. We can use Lightning preview to see what it looks like. Let's take a look here. This should load. I didn't try this part ahead of time, so it might not work. Okay, so here we go. So this is the form that we'll want to render, and this is what we're going to override. So this is going to take in all the information that you saw for that reservation request. Okay. And then similarly, we have our output component, which is our confirmation. And close this preview for now. For our confirmation, it's very similar. In this case, I'm just taking in a value, but if you were to look at the template, you can see that all the values that I want to render are being rendered. So let's see here. Where did I put it? So reservation.confirmation code and all of that information is in fact being rendered. We're just calling it something. We're just calling the API value, but we actually grab the values and set it as a reservation. You don't have to do it that way. I just prefer to. Okay, let's take a look at the chat. Make sure we don't have too many questions. All right, we have one question from Ravi here. In editor override input rendering, is the UI restricted to forms only, or can we implement other UI elements like selectable card components? For example, a list of accounts displayed as LWC cards that allow a user to select a card and submit. You absolutely can. You could render that. You can render that. What I will say is that when it comes to in editor renderers, and this is a kind of like pretty important for editor renderers, your component lives inside of a top level component. It's like inside of a container component that essentially is going to expect you to bubble up events to it to set the values, right? So it doesn't have to be a form. Doesn't have to be a form at all, but let me see if I can go find this code here. It doesn't have to be a form at all, but you will see a submit button underneath your renderer. Okay. So it's still a form because it has a submit button, but it doesn't have to be a form with input fields. Really great question. Really appreciate the question, Ravi. Okay. So we have our Lightning Web Component. We have our Apex code. The next thing we want to do is configure our Lightning type override. But in order to do that, we need to make sure that our Lightning Web Components actually target Agentforce inputs and Agentforce outputs so that you can use them with Lightning type overrides, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to update our metadata here. And we're going to add a target. So here is our confirmation. This is an output. So what we're going to want to do is, let's see here, you can put it here, targets. Oh, it's not working. Let's see, targets. There we go. And we're going to add a target. And our target is going to be Lightning. Make sure I spell that right. Agentforce output. Okay. This is going to be important for the next step. This allows this to be used as a renderer override. So that's going to be for our confirmation. And we're going to just do the same thing for our editor renderer. Okay, so for here, we're going to add some more metadata here. And instead of it being an output, because this reservation view is for our editor, we are going to say it is an Agentforce input, okay? And we'll just deploy this metadata. Now we're not done with our metadata. We're going to have to assign a target configuration after we set up our Lightning type override, because right now we're just saying that you can use this with a Lightning type override, but we haven't configured it for a specific one so that we can kind of tie the values together. Okay, so we've deployed our metadata here. The next thing to do is to actually build the Lightning type override. And we can do this here inside of our code, but what I have found to be easier is to actually do it inside of setup. So we're going to hop back into setup, and we're going to leave the agent builder for now. Okay, I'm going to leave the agent builder for now, and we're going to create a Lightning type override. Okay. And while that's loading, I'll take a look at the chat. And what is the meaning of, we'll get to that later. We have a question here from Subarna, is it possible to provide the recording? So this session is recorded and it will show up on the Salesforce Developers YouTube channel. So if you want to check it out, then definitely check it out on the Salesforce Developers YouTube channel, and also subscribe for sure. Okay, so let me make this nice and big. So here we are inside of Lightning types inside of setup. And I'm going to hide this. And in here, we have all of our standard Lightning types, as well as some custom Lightning types that I've used here. I've created. Now, to create a Lightning type, you'll just click New Lightning Type, give it a name, say Demo. Let's say we want to do a reservation editor. We'll just call this Reservation Editor. Now, when you make the label, you can't have underscores. And so you'll make your Lightning type. So here we're going to do it for our editor. You'll click New Lightning Type, and it'll ask you for an Apex class, okay? Now, what you'll want to do is find the specific Apex class that you want to render. Now, this is really important. This is where people get tripped up. I get questions about this all the time. Which Apex class do you want to target? You want to target your reservation request. Now, in the context of your invocable method, let me just show you so how you always know, okay? If you go back to your invocable action, this thing right here, the inner class, this is what you want. Another way that you can confirm this is if you go inside the Agentforce builder and you look for and you look at your input, you will also see that it has this particular Apex class, right? It'll be reservation.reservation request. Okay. As a matter of fact, let me show you. I'm going to go inside of Agent Builder. We're going to find our action really quickly. I just want to show it to you again. All right. See, this is what you want to override. And crucially, you want to make sure that it's required and that you're collecting the data from the user. You need these two things checked. You want these things checked, because if you're collecting data from the user, it's going to tell Agentforce to render the form, because it has to come from the user. Okay. Cool. So we're going to make sure we're doing reservation request for our input, and then it's going to be a reservation DTO for our output. Okay. Cool. So we're going to make our reservation. We're going to make our Lightning type. This one's just going to be for our editor. We're going to set reservation request. Okay. It's going to take us here where we can configure our UI. Now, again, you have an editor and a renderer. We are just going to set it for our editor. Okay. So we're going to click change, and we're going to go from the standard editor, which you can see the preview of, to our reservation view. Okay. And that's it. And now we have our Lightning type override for our editor. Now we just do the same thing for our renderer, our output. Say demo, reservation, confirmation. Or actually, let me make sure that I'm doing it right. Demo, reservation, renderer. I'll just call it a renderer. Okay. Because this is our output. So we're going to look for our reservation DTO. How do we know it's the reservation DTO? If we go into our Agentforce action, the output that we want to render has this specific class. Okay. We're going to go ahead and click create. Click UI configuration. Okay. Go to renderer. And we are going, there's two different types of renderers. So you can render a collection, or you can render just a single value. In our case, ours is not a collection. If it were a collection, the data type would be Lightning list type. If it's not Lightning list type, you're going to do render override. Okay. So we're going to click change, and we're going to set it to reservation confirmation. Okay. Click save. So now we've configured both of our Lightning type overrides. Okay. We've tied our Apex classes to a particular Lightning Web component. I'm going to take a quick peek at the chat here to see what we can do. All right, we have a question from Catherine. I assume we can use this with Agent Builder 2.0. You will be able to use this with Agent Builder 2.0 in the future. At the moment, at least with service agents, you cannot use Lightning type overrides with them yet. They lack a field to set the override. So not yet. In the future, but not yet. And take a quick look here. This one, here's a really good question from Puneet. Can we use file upload in the LWC component to upload a file via the agent? Great question. I have been trying to do that, and I have not been successful, but I know you can technically, but I haven't gotten it to work. So supposedly, maybe, but I would expect file uploads to eventually be a feature that is just standard as opposed to something that you have to build yourself. Great question. I think you can, but I'm not certain. But if you've been looking closely, you probably saw that I have an editor override for a file upload. That's an experiment that I'm trying to do. Okay, cool. So just to recap, we have made our Lightning type override for our editor and our renderer. We're not quite done yet, though, with our configuration. There's at least 2 more steps that we need to take. So we're going to hop back into our code, and we're going to do some more configuration on our Lightning Web component metadata. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and close this here. All right. So we have successfully made this a target for, this is our editor. So we're just going to start with our editor. And you can tell Lightning Agentforce input. So we've made it a target, but we need to set its configuration. Okay. We need to set the target configuration. And this is important because it's going to allow us to essentially, tell the Lightning type override which fields in the component map to the fields that are being outputted by the Apex method, okay? Or being inputted into the Apex method, since this is an editor, okay? So rather than just type this slowly, I'm gonna go ahead and just copy this one. Let's copy this one here. And here we go. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about this target config here. So at a high level, you need a target config. You need to specify what the target config is for. So this one's the wrong one. Let me grab the right one. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So you need a target config. You're going to need to set the target config for the target in particular. So this is the Lightning Agentforce input. And we're just saying that the target type, the data that we want to target, is going to be our Lightning type that we just created. Now, in our case, it's not this. You can find the right Lightning type by going into, you're going to go into Lightning types, and you'll just go to Lightning types here, and you're just going to click on the one you want to configure. So ours was the editor, I believe. So it's the editor. Okay. And it's this under the C namespace, which means that when you configure it, it's, just go back here, C namespace, demo reservation editor, the API name. Okay. So it's going to be C __ demo reservation editor. Okay. So I'll grab this, hop over here, C Demo reservation editor. There you go. And it's a very similar story for our renderer override. So this is our editor. We set this up. This looks good. We're going to go to our renderer and we'll do the same thing, essentially. The same thing. There's only one real difference, okay? So we're going to say that this is C __ demo reservation, and this is a renderer. So that should be the right name. I'm going to just check really quickly. So I'm going to go back to setup. Let's make sure that we got the right name. You need to have the right name. All right, so this is renderer. I'm just going to copy it, make sure. There we go. Okay. So now our Lightning Web Components are fully configured. Maybe I make this. We're going to deploy it. All right. So we've deployed this. We've tied our Lightning Web Component to our Apex inputs and outputs using the Lightning type overrides, okay? So the next thing we're going to do, our second to last step, is to update our Agentforce action. So we're going to hop back into setup. We're going to go to our Agentforce action, and we are going to change it so that rather than rendering just the Apex data, we're going to instead tell it to use the Lightning type override, okay? So here in setup, we'll go to Agentforce agents. And we'll go to our service agent. Now we have version 3 here, it's active. We're going to go ahead and clone it. We're going to clone it so that we can edit it, because you can't edit an agent that is active, right? So we're going to open up version 4, and we're going to go to reservation management, go to our topic action, and we're going to click edit action, okay? Now this is a moment of truth. We're going to click here, and we're going to set it to demo reservation editor. Now this overrides our inputs, and then we're going to override our output with this one, demo reservation renderer. And we'll just make sure that this is set to collect data from user, because this will ensure that our editor shows up. And we're going to do the same thing for show and conversation. You need both of these things checked here, okay? And we're going to click save. Now, because we are doing this for Enhanced Chat v2 and not for like an Enhanced Chat v2 on a service agent, and we're not doing this for an employee agent, if we were to test this here, it would not render the component. That doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just does not, the conversation preview editor doesn't render Lightning type overrides for service agents. It just doesn't. Okay. But I'm going to go ahead and activate this agent. We're going to ignore all these warnings. Okay. And before I proceed, I'm going to take a quick look at the chat here. See if we have any questions. Okay, here's a question from a LinkedIn user. How do you decide when an agent should return UI components versus conversational responses? This is a really great question. So if you are asking for a variety of inputs, if you're essentially asking an agent to create a form by talking, you should probably use a UI component. This is just because there's ambiguity and implicitness in conversational UIs. So if it's basically a form, just create a form. Forms come with validation. Forms come with branding. Forms are very, very explicit, right? And forms allow you to provide a variety of data that you can't do in a conversation. So imagine you wanted to book a dinner, right? And you say, I want to book at 6 p.m. There's no way in the conversation of an agent to really for the agent to be able to tell you what times are available without wasting a bunch of like text, right? But a UI, you can build a UI that can show which times are available using a custom Lightning Web component. So in those cases, you would generally want to build a UI component. However, if what you're doing does not require a lot of inputs, if it's not basically a form, if it's something that would more or less determine what the agent does, you should probably just go with conversational UI. A good check is like if the agent needs a lot of information to do a thing, it should probably be a form. It should probably be a form, and it should probably be a Lightning type override. It's a really good question, but opinions will differ on this one. Another one. What is the input? We have multiple input to the action. Okay, what is the input if we have multiple inputs into the action? That's a really great question. So what if you needed to override multiple what if you needed to override multiple inputs? If you needed to override multiple inputs, you have really two options. You can consolidate them into a single object and then have one render, or you could potentially have two. I have not done that though. It's a really great question. I have to follow up on that one. That might be a video in the future. But consolidating them would probably be ideal. Let's see. And okay, so let's move on because we are nearing the end here. So let's see here. We have our agent. It's active. Let's hop back to setup. The last thing we're going to need to do is just to upgrade to Enhanced Chat V2. So before we get to Enhanced Chat V2, let's just take a look at Enhanced Chat V1. So I have a site here. Actually, I think I can do it from embedded services. So, okay. So I believe it's this one here. I have an embedded service deployment here. It's currently on V1. You can always test a deployment by just going to test enhanced web chat. And here's our deployment, just so that we can check to see what it looks like now. And it's the same experience as in the agent builder. If I ask, can I make a reservation? It is going to ask a bunch of questions. Okay. So now let's upgrade to Enhanced Chat V2. And when we do that, we're going to get a new UI and support for our custom Lightning type overrides. Okay. So to do that, it's really simple. So in embedded service deployment settings, you're just going to click switch to V2. It's going to tell you all the cool things you'll get, including this nicer interface, support for custom Lightning types and other improvements. And we are going to go ahead and switch and publish. Now, this process can take a minute. And I have found in my experience that sometimes you actually need to hit this publish button a few times before your components render. Not always, but I've done a good amount of testing. Okay. So I'm going to hop back into testing enhanced chat here. And there we go. So here's Enhanced Chat V2. Here's our service agent. All right, and this is the moment of truth. Say, I'd like to make a reservation. Now, if everything is set up correctly, we should see a form as opposed to just a chat. Oh, it's just a chat. And that happens sometimes. It really does. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make sure that everything's configured properly. This happens. So let's do our check. First thing we're going to do, we're going to go to our agent. Let me just refresh and make sure that 4 is set up. So we have 4 set up. Yep, our renderer is configured. That's good. The next thing we're going to want to do is just make sure that our lightning types are in fact saved. That's another thing that can go wrong. So I'm going to open both of these. Let's see here. So our renderer is in fact saved. That's good. Let's hop back. Let's hop back here. Okay. I think I clicked on the renderer. We're going to look at our renderer. So this is saved. That's good. So the next thing we're just going to do is we'll just hit publish one more time. When you hit publish, it says that it can take up to 10 minutes for the entire process to be complete. And that does include the components. So it might just take time for it to render. I'm going to close this chat for now. And I'm going to take a look. Is 4 not active? I'm seeing in the chat that 4 is not active. It says 4 is active. I can refresh one more time to make sure that 4 is active. Yeah, it looks like 4 is active. If you go to setup sometimes for agent, for the legacy builder, you can activate an agent. And if you don't refresh, sometimes it won't show that your active agent is active because it doesn't automatically update which agent is active. So that happens sometimes. Okay. Here is a great question from a user while we wait for this to take effect. Do you see agent-driven UI components becoming a primary interaction model for enterprise workflows, or more of an enhancement to traditional UI? It really depends on the particulars, right? I would say that agent-driven UI will be more important for enterprise businesses simply because they provide the type of consistency, predictability, and reliability that enterprises require and expect that you can't always get from an agent. As before in the beginning, we had this example, right, where if you wanted to book something for a particular date, and you communicated it as like 2/11/2026, an agent might not necessarily interpret that in the way you mean it. And that's because conversational UIs are implicit, whereas graphical interfaces are explicit, right? And so just based on just for simply accepting new information, I would expect enterprises to make great use of agent-driven UI components. The other part are workflows. So if you have multiple steps that are linear, you could potentially do a lot of that work inside of the component itself instead of having the agent kind of orchestrate it. Agent orchestration is great when you need to take advantage of an agent's reasoning abilities. But if all you're doing is kicking off a flow, if all you're doing is essentially mapping a flow with an agent through if-else statements, you should probably just be using traditional automation and traditional coding tools like Apex and flows and such. So I expect to see a lot of people using this particular feature in a variety of use cases. That's an excellent question. Really great question from Puneet here. Can we change powered by Agentforce in the chat window? Let's take a look. Yes, you can. It's like playing whack-a-mole with the tabs here. Okay, so you can choose to display whether to choose to display it. So if I don't want it anymore, you can get rid of it, which is nice, but you can't really change it at the moment, but you can get rid of it, which is, I think, nice. If it doesn't meet your brand guidelines, you know, you're not forced to use it. Okay. Okay. Now let's try this one more time. Moment of truth. Would like to make a reservation. There we go. Okay. So it rendered, something went wrong. I know what's happening here. So if I were to look inside of this Lightning Web Component, there is an Apex method that I'm using to pull some of the times. Doesn't really matter for my purposes right now, but that is another thing that I've noticed. That's not an email address. Let's say charles@example.com. This eventually goes away. I don't know why this happens. Sometimes it just kind of happens, but expect that to be resolved when this thing comes out of beta. Okay. So we have our form. Let's see if we have our renderer, and we have our renderer. So I would say we're 90% of the way there. Waiting a little bit of time will eventually get rid of this error here. If we really want to, we can just go into our reservation view and we can just get rid of that. We don't need that. We don't need that toast. We can just delete it. Right. All right. Now, one thing I will say, that if you make a change like this, if you're like, oh, I don't like this thing, you may need to actually redeploy. You may need to redeploy your embedded service deployment here, right? So, for example, I just successfully deployed my metadata, I'm pretty sure. But if I do another conversation and I say, I want to make a reservation, there's a really good chance that I'll still see that error toast. Yep, see that? So if you ever run into that, pro tip, go back to your service deployment, publish it again, and that should unblock your errors. There's actually a doc on this, troubleshooting enhanced chat v2 in the help docs, and it recommends more or less just republishing if you have any issues like that. Okay, and we have a question. We have a question from Pravin, and a great question at that. Can we get this metadata to reference? Absolutely. I'm going to hop back into my presentation for a moment. If you go to this QR code, and remember, this is on Salesforce Developers YouTube channel. If you go to this, so you can always come back to this recording, but if you come to this YouTube code, it will take you to a GitHub repository where I have my metadata, as well as my Apex classes that you can check out. I also have a subfolder there that you can see another renderer that I made for a related YouTube video. Okay. Let's see here. Good question from Ashish. How to debug the LWC errors on submission? Same way you would debug LWC errors in general. It really does depend on what the error is, though. If it's an error inside the Lightning Web Component, traditional debugging tools work. If it's an error that happens when you try and submit, what you'll want to do is look at the way you've built your component and just make sure that it maps one-to-one to the fields that you're trying to either render in your renderer or set in your editor, right? So really great question. And let's see here. I'm going to go back one more time to my agent to see if, just to try it one more time. This will be the last time we try it. All right. And as you can see, it updated the form here. So again, If you ever have a problem with a component and you need to update a Lightning type override, just remember you have to republish it for that to show. Okay. All right. So I am going to go ahead here and drop the presentation. But I want to thank you all so much for joining us for this stream. Lightning type overrides are a really, really great feature. I particularly enjoy them because it's an opportunity to use those Lightning Web Component Apex skills that you developed over the course of your career as a Salesforce developer to make this new technology, AI agents, more performant, more consistent, more reliable, and a more custom experience than you would otherwise. So if you have any questions about what was shown here, please do feel empowered to hop on over to the recording of this live stream on YouTube, the Salesforce Developers YouTube channel, and ask your questions there. I will be watching and I will be responding to questions. And while I have you, I want to remind you to stay in touch, join the Salesforce Dev community, okay? Follow us on Twitter, follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube if you aren't already. We really do appreciate that. That's the best way to know about live streams like this and workshops and other really, really awesome opportunities. I want to thank you all so much for your time and attention. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take it easy.